Assalamu alaikum, friends of BookBytes, and welcome to this evening's edition on Freedom Day in South Africa of our fourth episode during season 12. I have a very exciting book that I've been reading this week, and I don't want to rely on cliche, but I think it's just opportune that on Freedom Day in South Africa, 31 years into the new dispensation, we get to read and review Available Light by Professor Daniel Magaziner, a biography of Mr. Omar Badsha, biography of a photographer, an archivist, a historian in his own right, who was intimately involved in documenting the struggle against apartheid. It's known as an intellectual history of protest in South Africa, drawn from a variety of interviews. The book conveys an intimate sense of Badsha's work from the 50s to today. And Professor Magaziner chronicles how art and politics became intertwined in South Africa and explains Mr. Badsha's efforts to maintain a critical aesthetic approach to political crises. I don't want to waste too much time. We already have cut into the show, but Professor Magaziner is a professor of history at Yale University. He's the author of The Law and the Prophets, Black Consciousness in South Africa, 1968 to 1977, and The Art of Life in South Africa. This book is an absolute page turner, and it gives me absolute pleasure to welcome both Omar Badsha and Daniel Magaziner to BookBytes this evening. Welcome both Daniel and Omar. Welcome to BookBytes.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you for
Hi,
having
And
us.
congratulations.
Thank you. And Omar, it's good to see you. Shafanaz, thank you for having us.
Absolutely fantastic. I know we missed you a few weeks ago when you launched the book locally, and we hope to see you on our shores again. But this was a beautiful publication. It's very easy to draw into cliche and talk about freedom and how biography comes together. But I'm very, very interested in the process of bringing these archives together. What was it like working together, which you do give a hint of, sort of very sort of methodologically, but there's an intimate sense of historian and subject, which I really enjoyed in the bringing together of Available Light. Daniel, perhaps we can hear from you right off, the start. What was it like working with Omar, and where did this all begin?
Thank you for asking. So working with Omar has been a great pleasure. Not always easy, but always challenging and intellectually stimulating. Omar and I have known each other for a bit over a decade. Omar had helped me out with some research for the book I did prior to this one. And along the way, we got to talking, and he invited me to collaborate with him on this project. And we've been working on it together for about 7 years, I'd say, since we got started. We were interrupted somewhat significantly and challenged by COVID because I was here and he was there. But we have, managed to work together over these years. And I think one of the great joys of doing the project is that Omar, both in terms of his own memories and stories that he can share, but also the archives that he has collected over the course of many decades, are really unparalleled. So it was an incredible opportunity for me to get access to these not only amazing visual records, but also other records that Omar has maintained over the course of decades. And anyone who's used South African history online would know Omar's great skills as an archivist and historian. And so being able to work on that project with him was one of the great pleasures of the project. It's, also it is a opportunity to engage with someone's own very closely held memories and experiences. And that's never necessarily a very straightforward thing to do. Along the way, we've had our challenges and disagreements, which part of the project of the book was to lay bare this is what happens when you do biography. This is when you are so fortunate to study and spend time with someone who is still alive and can push back in ways, in a variety of different ways. And it was just an incredibly intellectually rigorous and stimulating experience for me.
Well, this is by no means hagiography, and there's something so beautiful about the raw authenticity with which this has been brought together. Your opportunity to engage directly with Omar, who is somebody who has organically been a historian over his lifetime, has dedicated his life to, like you say, what's culminated in Saho and various other publications. Um, Omar, if you can like weigh in for us, what it's been like to be able to bear yourself and working with someone like Daniel, who's obviously been so sort of, in some ways gracious, but also very meticulous in how he's documented the dark and the light and every aspect of available light. I mean, I want to get into the title as well. What has it been like for you being seen so closely in this way?
No, it was a collegial discussion between us. Um, at times rough because, uh, you know, I always felt that Dan didn't really understand, uh, well, my background at all as well, and the community and area that I came from. So there, there was sometimes a bit of to doing and taking on. I took him on a number of occasions, and he didn't like it. But at the end of the day, he produced, I think, a reasonably good biography. There are huge sections of my life that he actually doesn't cover because I don't think I opened up to him on those areas, or he didn't push me to go further than what I had done in our interviews. But yeah, it has been an interesting experience. I'm very critical, and I say it openly, publicly. Uh, but I don't think I was very surprised. Dan is a very good writer. Um, we could have spent more time together and know each other's backgrounds better. But using whatever resources that he had in his hand, uh, access to, he's done a pretty good overview. There are whole sections of my life that I didn't open up to him, and so those are missing. So it's not his fault. I think it's my fault.
Daniel, as much as you can say, I mean, in significant ways, by writing Available Light, you've added to the continuum of struggle literature in post-apartheid South Africa. But this is not just a piece of what happened and what the experience was. Like you've said, you've had the opportunity to speak to Omar while he's still very coherent about his process. And now he has admitted as well, and probably it launches as well, that he's deliberately left out chunks of his life for whatever reason and for whatever those chunks might represent. Because in many ways, the personal is political within these contexts as well. What does it mean to you as a historian and as a researcher, not necessarily based in South Africa, having had the experience of documenting some amount of the struggle, commenting between the sort of the political continuum that you've relayed through this material, but also, as you said, a very dynamic subject who has decided how much to reveal and what those gaps even mean?
Yeah, thank you for that. And as you can see, I mean, one of the great joys and challenges of the project is that the project subject is perhaps its greatest critic. And so as we await the sort of book reviews to come rolling in of this book, one of the things that I'm somewhat comforted by is that I think the harshest criticism has already been levied by Omar at various moments in the process, which, you know, and as he said, like, that was, for me, speaking personally, kind of a challenging aspect of it, because that kind of bluntness with which he offers his criticisms of my methods and of the book itself it's sometimes hard to hear, but also I think it's so incredibly valuable because that if there wasn't an opportunity for him to offer such sorts of critiques, then the book actually doesn't capture its subject. Because to know Omar is to know that he's going to offer his opinions, and the consequences, whatever. I think one of the great things, though, and about the project, and Shafanaz, I'll go back to one of the things you said at the outset of this conversation, that I've always been a little bit, as a trained historian, I've always been a bit skeptical of biography because of that hagiographic aspect of it. And one of the things that struck me in reading the history of struggle biographies, in particular in South Africa, is that oftentimes there's a little bit of sometimes cannot be that interesting because there is this emphasis on the heroic over and against the human. And one of the things that I was really trying to do with this book, and why I was so fascinated with Omar, is to know Omar, his humanity in all of its levels is there, and it is grappling with that and grappling with emotions. We had some fascinating conversations over the course of the research about things like anger, about things like frustration, about things like what are the psychic tolls of struggle? What are the costs? What are the values? What are the benefits? And part of what we tried to do in the project, and what was very important to me, was to kind of think not just about here's the things that we did, but what also were what were the psychological experiences of it? What was the emotional experience of it? And part of the challenge in thinking through these things is that Omar and his family and these people that I've connected and interviewed, these are sometimes very raw emotions. They're sometimes very closely held experiences, and navigating that is one of the joys of the project. But also, it's not easy. It was never easy. It's to this moment is still challenging. So trying to blend that sense of what was the personal experience of these broad-based political transformations. And as someone who for decades has been fascinated by the history, to get into the intimacy in the way that Omar's story allowed me to do so was an incredibly rewarding experience.
I also imagine there must be an incredible degree of trust that develops to be able to finally be able to let this out between the both of you, because there's this idea that Omar has curated a lifelong historical sense, not just of his own life, but of the political life that he's engaged in, and then giving this across to you and being critical because of just how personal it is as well. And I want to talk about this interplay between the personal and the political. Omar, in Letters to Farzana, that I think is the most poignant of this interplay of how political the personal is for you. Maybe speak to us a bit about that project in particular.
Which one? Letter to Farzana?
Yeah.
We are talking about my first book, Letter to Farzana. Well,
that's right.
Like all fathers or parents, when a baby is born, it's a major event in the life of the family, the immediate family, and a broader family, and for me it was an incredible experience to see this little baby, this child, come into the world and being nurtured and growing up. And Nasima was incredible as a mother, and caring and detailed, making sure that she covered all the areas that is required as a young woman with a child, and we loved well, I mean, it was not easy because I was in the middle of a lot of activity, especially in my work in Inanda, in the unions, in Inanda, in the political underground. And so, uh, one balances all of that. And she also was an activist. And people might not know this, but, the women's movement in Durban started with her and her colleagues. I was drawn into it, but they were the ones who started it. So she was not just a wife, she was a partner, an equal partner. But bringing up a child, and in the conditions and working, and she worked. She was a lecturer at the medical school, and not just somebody who went to lectures, but took an intimate role in the life of many of her students. And also they collaborated. It was not just a student lecturer's relationship, it was also a political relationship as comrades. And so, both of us were very active, but we've managed to bring up this very beautiful child, and managed to keep all the various balls in the air, and it was the most difficult of times for everyone concerned, not just us as a family, but the community, broader community. So every day was a challenge. And for me, in particular, working in some of the most difficult areas, working class areas, uh, it was quite extraordinary because these coming home every day, um, seeing and being exposed to so much around one is concerned about one's health actually, and and concerned about passing whatever one sort of is exposed to this child, to the family. And it was, there was typhoid, there was in you name it, in under, other than the violence. But she kept the house going. She kept me in line, and which is not easy, but she kept me in line, and held a job. So this child grew up, and she's a young lady, and and it's largely due to the mother. She really put everything um, into bringing up this child. She, being a scientist, made sure that everything that every there was an incredible care, and in how uh, I can't actually really articulate it, but uh, uh, you know, she worked and came home and worked at home, and then she had to deal with me, and my the all these tensions and things like that. But she was also a mother and caring mother. She uh, uh, and I'm always grateful for her, and the way she dealt with bringing this little child into the world and making her into a very, very bright young lady.
And I think I appreciate how your partner, I mean, it's actually so beautifully that she was probably the strongest support that you had. Built a dream was in your own right, conscientizing strength to people and communities struggling alongside. She came through support or financial support or whatever the case might have been, holding your life together. So that was very significantly captured, and I really appreciated that. Also, your conscientizing over time and how that expresses itself through various forms of your art, your drawings. Your consciousness is sort of constantly given form through the photography that you see. It's almost like this process of receiving and giving. Daniel, and you capture that beautifully. Speak to us about some of it, but also I want to get into the cliche about the title, because Available Light is more than just, I mean, it brings the photography, the drawing, the seeing, the real seeing of the struggle and how it's processed through fear and courage through the book. If I can hear a little bit about that from you as well.
Okay, thank you. And I really just want to highlight what Omar just said about his first project, and because it gets really to this question of the personal and the political. And one of the things that I think that drew me into Omar's work at the outset was the way in which he demonstrated this understanding that family life was inseparable from the broader social context in which people lived, and that you needed to, and he just laid out all the ways in which these balls had to be kept up in the air in his own family, but then also in his work, when the work that he offered and presented into the world was often depicting these families who, in often very dire circumstances, were also trying to keep the balls in the air, and the ways in which these families were subject to these broad social forces that were manifest even in the intimate space of the home. And I think, to get to the question of the title, one of the things that I really wanted to capture in studying Omar's life was that you have this remarkably long career. You have not, and it's to say career, it's kind of belies. It's not a job. It's how Omar has lived. And so from the 50s, with this sort of moment of the awakening of political consciousness as a young person, all the way through right now, there's just so many years and so many moments and so many movements and so many projects that he's been engaged in. And so one of the things that I was trying to understand, or I thought was really fascinating to me, and is also just always fascinating me in a general level about the struggle as a whole, is this: it took a very long time. It took decades of concerted effort by thousands upon thousands of people to create change in South Africa. And so trying to understand that mentality of working over decades, having both a short term, what is the project in front of us, and a longer term, what are we trying to build towards, having to maintain both of those perspectives and maintain that ability to have faith and keep working that these things are going to ultimately lead somewhere better. I find that to be a remarkably empowering, if somewhat also challenging notion, because it does say that this takes time and it takes effort and it's not easy. And so one of the things I wanted to capture with the title was that sense that there was always something to do, that no matter how dark things seemed, there was always something that could be done. And then, of course, there's the other aspect of the title, which is that it's a technical description of Omar's photographic method. Since he didn't use a flash, he was always working by available light, and the skill with the light meter and being able to understand how exposures can be made with what's at hand. And so trying to kind of think through that on multiple levels, and to see it both as a technical description of a photographic method, but also what I think is really a mentality. This notion that there's always something to be done. There's always some little bit of light through which or by which we can see to kind of crack open possibilities. I find it incredibly powerful. I find it an incredibly important lesson. Especially, I'm speaking now from the United States, and your viewers will know the United States right now is in the throes of a political crisis. And that political crisis requires us to learn from people with experiences trying to find those moments of light that can be wedged open and can be turned into projects and to work on these multiple levels. So that is what we were thinking with the title.
There's no doubt that the rise of, fascist kind of rhetoric in the US is having reverberating effects all over the world. And if you're able to draw on the strength and the courage and the experiences of what's happened around the world, then there's that light that will carry you through this period. We're kind of running out of time, but I also want to acknowledge, I mean, Omar, you've received recognition in various spaces for your work, for your lifelong work, national awards and that sort of thing. I want to comment and just sort of bring up that, even in terms of the new dispensation and the kind of euphoria that was drawn on for making of a non-racial and a sort of inclusive cultural kind of institutions. I want a bit of comment on that, because 30 years later we're finding that we're still sort of grabbing at straws, trying to make an inclusive and a really impactful space in terms of our cultural heritage, in various of the spaces. If you can just comment on that quickly, I'd love to hear some of that, where it was, where it began, and what you see happening on the road ahead.
You know, Nasima and I were very lucky that some of our closest friends were activists, incredible people who went through hell, but kept their dignity, kept and the resilience of being under pressure, or their families under pressure, and but in and in that period, they all these comrades, much older than me, most of them, uh, helped us to navigate that period, and the comradeship and the linkages between us was not just as political, but it was, like a broad family. We looked after each other, we cared for each other, and even up to now, with many of those people, we continue to keep in touch, and talk about our days and the challenges we face now. But it that period like that in our history and the history of other countries that go through national liberation, or major changes, political changes, brings about, creates a generation of people who uh, 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 learn to deal with crisis, and but at the same time keep keep focus on the goals, and also, most important, not lose their humanity in the process. That is, I think, what helped us and helped me and my family when we were in difficulty. We looked at our friends and we said, they're going through much worse than what we are, and that we cannot, sort of drop our guards. We need to be able to walk in alongside them, and so that form of comradeship and networking and inspiration that one is able to draw on is very important. So whether you are in Palestine or wherever you are, if in the process of struggle people come together because their lives and everything depends on others. And so there's an underlying sort of sense that you can't drop the ball. And the people around us, many of whom were in much more dire situation than us, but we're able to keep keep that keep a level of dignity and resilience, and draw on each other's support to get through the period that we lived under.
Omar, thank you so much for expressing that sentiment. I really appreciate it. We have run out of time, but I want to acknowledge you've made significant and huge contributions in so many ways to establishing these councils, documenting the history, the archives along the way, and to Daniel as well. I mean, I think what you've done here, obviously you're aware, is a worthwhile project that you've been able to accomplish in bringing the story to light in more than just available light. And we, as the book launches around the country and around the world in the next few weeks and months, we hope to hear really significant sort of value for it in the public domain. And we wish you everything of the best. Thank you so much for giving us your time this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Omar.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you very much.
And so we spoke to Mr. Omar Badsha and Professor Daniel Magaziner about Available Light. That's it from us this weekend on BookBytes. Thank you for the time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.